Hello, Oscillator Sync here. I'm releasing some new music on my bandcamp today. It's entirely made using the Korg Opsix, one of my favourite synths when it comes to exploring sound design. And in this video, I'd like to give some context as to what this release actually is. If you just want to go listen, you'll find a link in this video's description. A few years ago, I posted a video of what I called 4 alien soundscapes made on the Korg Opsix. Off the back of that video, I started a collaboration with game designer and musician Connor Sherlock, working on an interactive audio-visual realization of some of these ideas, expanding the range of sounds and pairing them with an alien landscape for them to exist in. It was an interactive, vast alien art installation, all scored using the Opsix with patches that I created specifically for the project. Unfortunately, like many passion projects, this very understandably fell victim to real-life pressures and commitments. I'm hopeful and confident that it will be released at some point because what we already have is, in my opinion anyway, very cool, and I'd really like folks to see what we have made. However, as part of the planned release, I put together an alternative version of the music designed to be listened to as an album rather than interacted with in the game world. It uses all of the same sounds that I created for the game, but the music is composed and arranged from scratch. It's sort of a parallel universe version of some of the same musical ideas that we were using in the game. I've decided to put out this alternative version of the music as a standalone release on my bandcamp. If you download it, you also get access to all of the Opsix patches used to make the music. They can be loaded into the hardware or Opsix Native, the virtual instrument version of the synth. A full walkthrough of these patches would likely take hours, but we've got time to take a look at some of the ideas that sit behind these patches, I think. So I'll just start by talking about some sort of general ideas that I guess sort of permeate most of the different patches that I've created for this project. So one thing that I did on almost every single patch was make use of a user algorithm. So rather than one of the sort of built-in algorithms, I built my algorithm to do a particular job. And I've talked about building different synthesis architectures on the Opsix in quite a few videos. In particular, my videos about can you build a other synth inside the Opsix. So did a video where I built like a Juno style synth, one where I built a music easel, a sort of Vox Humana filter bank type thing. And I could have probably made some of these with built-in algorithms, but I was always sort of, with these patches, sort of building the architecture first for the different sounds. And in many cases, the reason I was building the sort of the different architecture was to do sort of the fake multi-timbral trick where I was layering up different sounds, different operators sort of doing different jobs. So, for example, in this patch here, if we take out all of these different operators, this first operator here is doing kind of a low rumble. This next one here, a higher, more resonant sort of wind sound. I think these first 3 are all sort of different wind sounds. And then this last one here, which has been driven by these 2 other operators. That's kind of our pitch. And then bringing them all together, you get a pretty complex sound. This patch also sort of highlights the other couple of things that are probably run through most of the patches. The first is using sort of generative ideas. There are a lot of random LFOs. They're not always random, but most of them are. And in many cases, the speed of the random LFOs is being itself modulated by another LFO. So Lots of sort of generative, sort of semi-self-playing ideas here. I wanted, to be able to hold a key for a long time and have the sound evolve in interesting ways. And you can see all of the modulation happening up here. There's a lot of it going on. The other thing that's sort of in this patch that is used a lot is I was making a lot of use of filter operator types, so whether it was the filter or the filter FM, and typically with sort of fairly high resonance, often modulating the resonance. You can see it being modulated here. So a lot of the sounds that you hear are kind of the filter rather than like the oscillator for the operator. Another kind of overriding idea that comes through quite a lot of the patches is the idea of sort of organic sounds, and I don't mean organic in the sort of buzzword analog organic, but I mean like literally taking ideas from the organic world. So you can kind of hear in this patch, you've kind of got that singing resonance of the filter, but this sort of buzzing insect amphibian movement happening in there as well. And a lot of that again is driven by the sort of random generative ideas with the LFOs. You can see a lot of modulation happening here. But in many cases, the way you get these sort of more organic sounds is actually by using sort of very, very low-tuned operators. You can see most of these operators are extremely low-tuned, and that's what gives us that sort of crackling, insectoid, amphibian kind of thing. So in many cases, having a higher tuned operator that you're listening to and then these very, very low-tuned modulators, it's a good way of getting these kind of cool organic sounds. The landscape that we were kind of creating in the game world wasn't always a nice place, I guess. So a lot of the patches will also sort of go towards aggression, and in many cases just straight up atonality. So this is a good example of just straight atonality. A lot of this has been driven by just straight modulation of these sort of fixed tuning oscillators. So yeah, in a lot of cases, to get those sort of atonal sounds, I'll use operators which are in the fixed mode rather than in the ratio mode, which means they're not following the keyboard at all. As I play different notes on the virtual keyboard at the bottom, you can hear that sort of the resonance of the sound is moving around, and that's happening because there is a tuned oscillator here, but that's kind of a thing that's happening almost as a background side effect in this sort of constant atonal random movement. It's being driven by the rest of the patch. Also not shying away from sort of more distorted sounds. There's also a fairly complex internal feedback of sounds here, really driving things into this atonal world. This is not a patch that you can easily play, but it is a fun one to listen to. This is a fun patch and kind of different to a lot of the other patches, I think. But it was something I particularly wanted to build. You'll again notice that a lot of the different operators, the ones that you're hearing, 1, 3, and 5, are actually all fixed, but they are changing pitch as we move around, and that's because in the V patch here, I've got the note number, so the point on the keyboard that you're playing, affecting the pitch of these fixed operators, but in a non-linear way. So I think 60 would give you sort of a standard movement. We're on 30 here, which I think means we should have, yeah, an octave more or less happening every 2 octaves. But in between there, you've got sort of roughly a 24 even temperament. And this is how you build sort of non-standard temperaments on the Opsix. The way that I used this particular patch in the game was to have many, many, many different objects in the game world, each playing a note over and over again that were sort of not in sort of a standard temperament. But because they were sort of coming in and out, sometimes they would sound in tune with each other, sometimes very atonal. Yeah, fun patch. And yeah, this idea of note number to pitch on a fixed operator is how you do sort of non-standard temperaments on the Opsix. I wanted to just to finish off, I wanted to just mention this patch because it's, I think, my favourite. It's these lovely sort of organic, sort of wooden resonances. And again, this is all making use of sort of resonant filters, because the filter operator type tracks the keyboard by default. You can use them to be pinged, basically, which is what's happening here. You've got some, I think this one in particular is a very, very low tuned saw, and it's basically pinging the filters. And there's sort of a layering of 2 sounds. I think these last 2 ones here are just a nice little hum. These 2 here are that sort of wooden clacking. So again, these 2 operators which are feeding the filters are sort of sub-audio rate. And then these very high resonance filters here on 3 and 4 are being pinged. So if we lowered the resonance, you basically wouldn't hear a pitch anymore. More sort of like a percussive thwack. But because we have the resonance nice and high, we get that nice wooden plucky sound. Anyway, I hope this little brief guided tour was interesting, and I really hope you enjoy the album and the patches. If you've got an Opsix, I encourage you to take a look at them, see how they're built, see if there are ideas that you can steal and use in your own patches. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care. Bye-bye.